So the series that we're in right now, that you guys are watching, is called No Strings Attached. And the theme of this series is for us to let go of those things that hold us back from fulfilling the destiny and the purpose that God has for us. If you're taking notes, which if you're watching on a PC, you can take notes on there. The name of this talk today, of this message today, is called Crashing Idols. And we're going to be talking today about living out the life that is inside of us. You see, every single person, I remember when I was 5 years old, I started dreaming about the things that I wanted to do with my life. The awesome thing is that through serving God and growing in my relationship with God, I am exactly where I saw myself, exactly doing the things I saw myself doing. You see, and we all have that dream. We all have that longing in our heart, whether it is to have a healthy family, whether it is to have a successful business, whether it is to do things the right way and to get into the right relationships. We all have these longings in our heart. But there's something that happens that attaches to us that causes us to interfere with sometimes the things that we want to do. You see, in these strings in our life, they're replaced by words. Maybe someone called you names when you were a little kid, and now those words really take effect in your life. You see, I don't belittle the things that are said into your life. I know my son, when he was born, I was so intentional with wanting to be very careful with the words that we spoke into his life. And even when I accidentally said stupid or said, man, this is just dumb, I tried to reverse my words. Because listen, there is so much power in your words. Words don't just hurt feelings. Words create identity. Words spoken over people create identity, and words spoken over you have created an identity that you hold on to. You see, and these strings in our life are also placed by culture, by the things that are cool, the things that are not cool, the things that are acceptable, and the things that are not acceptable. You see, you may want to try to do something unique, but culture is going to stop you and say, dude, that looks dumb. No, that's not the way we do things now. You see, and so we allow strings to control us. And sometimes they're also placed by experiences in our life. I know for some people, they love to see God as a good father. And whenever you say that God is a good father, they get goosebumps. Like, oh, God is a good daddy. Because if my daddy was good, then my heavenly daddy is even better. But for some people, when you use the word daddy, it's a trigger word. It means that, oh, really? God is like dad? The dad that wasn't there? The dad that was abusive? The dad that harmed me? The dad that harmed me by his words? And so these experiences in our life, they change our perspective. Experiences are great in our life. We all have great experience. But experiences don't just stop in moments of time. They become the filters in how we see things. Experiences become the filters in how we see God and how we see ourselves and how we see others. See, so have you ever tried talking to someone and telling them, dude, what you are doing is dumb? Or, girl, what you're doing is crazy. And they're like, what am I doing? What's so bad about what I'm doing? And it's so hard for sometimes to convince people that what they're doing is crazy and it's harmful to them, but they don't notice because of the filters of their life. Maybe that's how dad was and mom was, so they feel it's okay for them to be that way. You see, and sometimes these strings in our life, they form naturally, but they were there to be defense mechanisms. So that no one will call me stupid again, so I'm not going to do that thing again. So no one calls me poor, so no one says I'm unsuccessful, well, I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to be rich. Which is good to have that attitude to want to not allow these words to take effect, but sometimes they create the opposite effect, and they control you. Instead of just wanting to be successful, we want to become greedy, and we want more and more and more, even though we already have success. And even though you notice, man, how did I end up this way? I wanted to have a healthy family. I wanted to have healthy friends. I wanted to have a healthy relationship with God, or I wanted to be in this place in my life. It's not just about money. It's not just about, success. But sometimes, man, like I really wanted to step out into this career that I wanted, but my fear and the doubt that I can do it and that I have it holds me back. And a lot of times, the sad thing is that we end up just accepting the strings, accepting the fear, accepting the insecurity, accepting the doubt, the pain, the unforgiveness. And this turns to jealousy, anger, addiction, and hate, to where you notice you can't break out of these things. And they hurt you, but not just that, they hurt your relationships, they hurt your family, they hurt your friends, and the way you view God, keeping you from truly living your life fully. You see, when we're thinking about what is going to be our first series, what is going to be the thing that we talk about first? Well, what's really in my heart is people living out the purpose that God has for them. You see, I believe that there's two ways that we can look at purpose. There's extrinsic purpose, which you can make up your own purpose based on, your own success, your own place in life, your own social status, and you can define and make your own purpose, but that's never going to satisfy the intrinsic purpose in our life. The purpose that only comes from God. Notice people have gotten so much purpose out of the things that they've done, but they're not happy inside. And we see this all over the news, all over Hollywood sometimes. People have made it, but the intrinsic purpose that comes from God is not there. Achieving your dreams in our hearts, you're controlled by yourself. And see, last week we talked about Gideon, the story of Gideon. And what happened is that Gideon was a young man. He was an Israelite in Israel. And what happened is the surrounding regions has started to take over Israel. Much like we see today. Everybody was wanting to attack Israel. Everybody wanted Israel's land. But the Israelites, because they started allowing the strings to control them of fear and insecurity, they started to give in and started to worshiping. Instead of them worshiping the true God, the God that brought them out of Egypt, the God that created great miracles and bringing them out. He split the Red Sea and they walked through and they saw the most amazing things. They started worshiping dead idols. And so what happens is God gave them to those idols. And all of a sudden they began to get taken over because God said, okay, my protection in you all's lives is going to be removed because you rather worship idols. So they began to worship idols. And now they were afraid because now the Midianites, this region next to them, started taking over, raiding their food. Every time it was the harvest time, the Midianites came and stole their food. So Gideon, this one time, he is going into a wine press, which is a hole in the ground, and he's getting out some wheat. He's breaking down some wheat and going for the corn. And God went down to him. A theophany. God becoming man before the New Testament, before Jesus became incarnated in the New Testament. God came down here and he wanted to have an encounter with Gideon. He wanted to set Gideon free so that Gideon could in turn set Israel free. Free people, free people. And so what happened here is God tells Gideon, Gideon, you are a man of valor and I am with you. And Gideon starts sharing with God. I encourage you to find the book of Judges chapter 6, his whole story. And after that, when he realized that he was talking to God, when God leaves, here's how the story unfolds. And so when Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out. Gideon then realized, oh my gosh, I was talking to God. He's like, oh sovereign Lord, I'm doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. He was afraid because he had not had this close encounter with God. It is all right, the Lord replied. Isn't it funny how sometimes we feel that when we want to get close to God, you may have a bad past, or you may still be in a bad moment. And the idea of even watching this live stream or going to church, it's like, oh, I'm doomed if I go to church. The church is going to burn down. And God's like, bro, sis, chill, okay? I'm for you. I love it that you're here. I love it that you're listening. I want to speak into your life. This is my moment with you. So here's what happened. God says, do not be afraid. You will not die, all right? Calm down, Gideon. You will not die. And so Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace, God of peace. And this altar that he built there of rocks, he stacked up some rocks and built a perfectly beautiful little box there of rocks. He built this altar, sacrificed an animal, and said, this moment right here, this altar that he built is like, because God is a God of peace. And that night, the Lord said to Gideon, little did Gideon know that God actually had a plan with that experience. You see, the experiences that you have with God, they become more than just experiences. God wants to actually use you and do something amazing with your life. And so that night, the Lord said to Gideon, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that is 7 years old, pull down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole standing beside it. Now these two things, Baal and Asherah, were gods. Then build an altar to the Lord your God here on this hilltop sanctuary. It says, now build an altar for me, the living God. Lay in the stones carefully. Sacrifice the bull as the burnt offering on the altar using the fuel of the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down. So Gideon, he was like, dude, I need some help. So he goes and calls his 10 servants. He's like, get over here, guys. All right, we're going to do something crazy, all right? This was crazy, guys. It's like going down across the street and tearing down a church or tearing down a temple or tearing down a mosque and saying, okay, we're going to put a cross here. He's like, all right, we've got to do this at night. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had commanded. He's like, all right, God, you spoke to me. I know you're with me. So I'm going to do as you say. But he did it at night because he was afraid. All right, cool. All right, God's like, I'll take that. Are you going to do it? You're afraid. Okay, but you're still going to do it. So he did it at night because he was afraid of the other members of his father's household and the town of the people. See, everybody else was afraid. Everybody else did not want to mess with these gods. Let me tell you something. Living for God is easy. Everybody wants to live for God when it's confined to their own strings, when it's confined to their own life. Everybody wants to make God fit into their own mold. They want to have a buffet-style God, where it's like, all right, I want to take this part of God that I like. I don't want to take hell. No, I don't want hell. And I'm going to take this part of God. And I'm not going to call him Jesus because, kind of Jesus separates between them. So I'm just going to call him God. And I'm going to take a little bit of this other God because, this is cool. And so we become to mesh our own perspectives and definitions of God. And we love it. We love the idea of God when it doesn't mess with our strings, when it doesn't mess with stepping out, when it doesn't mess with changing our lifestyle. But the first thing that God wanted to do with Gideon, he says, Gideon, are you serious about me? Then do this. Destroy your father's altar. Your father's gods. And there's two gods. So there's a reason why God wanted to do this. It's number one, God who is pure and holy. And if you read through the first 5 books of the Bible, you'll see the laws and all the rules that God gave these people. And there were rules of being clean, of being pure, all these rules about protecting what is sacred and worshiping God, worshiping the true living God. If you know your 10 Commandments, God says, do not worship any other God beside me. Protecting what is sacred, marriage, purity. And so these gods were much like the gods that we worship today. We haven't changed. We still allow culture to tell us who to worship. And so these two gods the first one was called Baal Peor. So historians say that Baal Peor was a god of sexual promiscuity, a god of just sexual perversion and lust and pervertedness. See, much like we see today, we see this Baal Peor god on the stage at the VMA Awards, at the MTV Awards. We see this god walking down the streets. Prostitution, we still see worship to this god. And the other one was Asherah, the god of fertility. So we're going to have this, and we're going to do this, then let's be fruitful. And let's make babies out of this. And then all of a sudden these gods that got mixed, and these gods, these idols, they were not just fantasies. These were demons as they started worshiping, and demons influence culture. But that's for like a whole other series. See, but all these gods were the surrounding region. These were not the gods that God introduced to them. God was trying to get them to see Him as God, the living God. And I want you to get this. It's funny how we worship culture instead of God. It's funny how we worship the things that we see around us. You can have had a great encounter with God, a great experience with God, or maybe even right now you may just be sensing God in your heart. But I can guarantee you, as soon as you move past this, you're going to be bombarded with gods. You see, back in ancient Rome, you couldn't even walk down the street without bumping into some type of idol, a real tangible idol, like a rock or a stick or something carved out of something. And the same thing today. You can't go down the street without seeing a billboard to some type of idol. These things that we want to worship. And these idols, they fog up your true identity in God. See, if you want to find who you are, you gotta look into God. You want to find out the things in your life, the things that are deep in your life, you want to get fixed in your life. All these awesome self-help books, okay, all right, cool, it's positive and it could be beneficial, but nothing is going to be as revealing as when you look into the mirror of God, when you look into your relationship with God. I remember this one time, I thought I was perfect. I thought like, okay, I've been living for God now for 8 years. All right, I have this awesome relationship with God. I'm sacrificing my life for God. I'm doing everything for God. And I'm just there, sitting down. And I'm just praying. And I'm saying, God, what's next for me? I'm perfect. All right, I know what you're thinking. And I'm just there thinking, okay, God, I'm cool. And all of a sudden, I had this visualization that God dug into my heart. God dug into my life. And He took out this nasty, black, kind of like a hairball. And He just showed it to me. He says, Carlos, this is your pride. And this is your ego. And I said, oh God, thanks for taking that out of me. And then He put it back in me. He took this hairball. He put it back inside of me. And God says, you have to get rid of that. And then I realized, wow, God revealed something to me. See, God is a revealing God. You see, idol worship, it doesn't allow you to see yourself the way God sees you. We'd rather please culture than please God. We'd rather stay away from that. You see, and God had to remove these idols. And God told Gideon to get that fattened bull. That was a significant thing. You see, in Jewish culture, it took a community to fatten up a bull. You see, everybody got together with their homeboys and homegirls and said, all right, guys, we're going to have a big old worship church service where we're going to sacrifice a bull to Baal and Asherah. All right? So we need to make sure that this bull is healthy, it's fat, it's good, because this is what the gods like. So everybody took a lot of food, a lot of money to fatten up this bull. And they were all excited for the day that they got to sacrifice this bull to their idols. No pun intended. And so here's what happened. God tells Gideon, get that bull that the whole community has been waiting for to sacrifice to all these idols and use it for me. You see, God broke His own kind of pattern here. Because one of the things that you were not supposed to do in Jewish culture is interfere anything having to do with idolatry with the sacredness of God. But God was showing a picture here. Gideon, I'd rather you destroy those idols and replace me there. I'd rather you destroy your idols of greed, your idols of, yourself, egotism, nihilism, and replace it with myself. See, if you give God what was meant for something else, you may have something that you just really wanted to use for something else, something that was not for God. It was an idol. It was something going to be used for idols. No matter what it is, even in your own life, you may have wanted to do something else with your life. But if God is putting something in your heart and you're like, I know for me, I was like, I don't want to live for God. When I was 18 years old, I had like everything going for me. It's like, I don't want to live for God. I'm popular. I have girlfriends. I have cars. I have money. Why would I want to live for God? And then I had the realization of this fact, that if you give to God, even what was meant for something else, God will use it to do great things with it. no matter what it is. And this is what God was showing Gideon. So early the next morning, as the people of the town began to stir, everybody started realizing something's going on here. Someone discovered that the altar of Baal had been broken down and that the Asherah pole beside it had been cut down. And in their place, a new altar had been built, the altar to the living God. And in it were the remains of the bull that were sacrificed. People were ticked. They're like, our gods have been destroyed. That bull that we fanned up has been sacrificed. And the people said to each other, who did this? Who jacked up our church meeting here? And after asking around and making careful search, they learned that it was Gideon. That little twerp that was hiding in the wine press had destroyed these idols and sacrificed the bull. So they went to Joash's house and they said, bring out your son. The men of the town demanded of Joash. Oh, here's dad. Okay, what am I going to do? Bust out the shotgun. He must die for destroying the altar of Baal and cutting down the Asherah pole. And it's cool as the wisdom that God gave Joash right here. But Joash shouted to the mob, why are you defending Baal? Will you argue his case? Like, does he need you? What kind of God is it if he needs you? Whoever pleads his case will be put to death by morning. If Baal truly is the God that you say he is, let him defend himself and destroy the one who broke down his altar. From then on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal defend himself, because he broke down Baal's altar, the altar of Baal. See, freedom causes resistance. If you decide at this moment that you want to make God your God, the living God, Jesus, your God, I can guarantee you there's going to be resistance. If you're in a culture, you're going to get resistance by your culture. If you're a Muslim, you're going to get resistance from your community. Sometimes even Christians will give you resistance to you because you want to have a real relationship with God, because you want to live with God in a real way. You see, living for God is going to cause resistance in your life. There's going to be pressure. People are going to be like, you're going to do that? Your friends are not going to understand it. See, it's easier. I'm going to bring out my puppet here. Sometimes we just accept it's easier to live bound. It's easier to just live a puppet to ourselves, controlled by what people think, controlled by our insecurity, than to remove these strings and live for God. And to remove these things in our life and discover the purpose and the value and the destiny that God has for us. But the first thing that God's going to ask to be set free is you've got to remove these things in your life that you worship over God. Whatever it is. See, if you're on Instagram and you follow some of these celebrities, it's all about themselves. It's all about selfies. It's all about their own beauty and their own worth. See, God wants to be Lord even over yourself. God says, worship me. That's the whole thing with Adam and Eve. So God says, are you going to worship me, or would you rather be your own God? And they chose to be their own God. See, God wants you to see Him as the Lord and as the God of your life. And so this morning, wherever you're watching from, we're about to go on with the rest of our day. It's early in the morning, depending where you're watching from. You have an opportunity right now to go into this journey with God, to have a vibrant relationship with Jesus Christ, a life full of abundance, just purpose and value and experience. That's why I love to refer to our relationship with God as a journey, because we never know where God's going to take us. As we wrap up, I want you to click on that Know Jesus button. If God is moving in your heart, we want to send you a Bible. We have some awesome music that will just get you thinking about God. And there's a reading plan. And there's a lot more resources that we want to give you. I thank you for being a part of this live stream. I so look forward to our next one. Invite a friend. Let them share in this experience. God bless you.